Hello, Taylor Army, and welcome back to my YouTube channel, All Things Taylor, with your girl, Taeler Hendrix. Today, I have a very interesting report for you guys. If any of you are Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings fans here, you're going to be very interested in this information. Now, as you guys know, I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan, J.R.R. Tolkien. I absolutely love it. I have not yet gotten into Game of Thrones. Definitely let me know if you liked the Game of Thrones series, because that is definitely going to be a part of what we're going to be talking about in this latest video update. So, in a recent interview with The Independent, George R.R. Martin discussed his goals and his thoughts on how people pit different TV shows and movies and stuff against each other instead of supporting everything. But he also talked about how he is human and he is competitive. And here's what he had to say. So, as you guys may or may not know, whether you are a Lord of the Rings fan, a Game of Thrones fan, science fiction, or fantasy fan, I happen to be very into fantasy and some science fiction, but more so like the fantasy realm and genre. You know, like Lord of the Rings, you've got Chronicles of Narnia, Harry Potter, Miss Peregrine's, School from Peculiar Children, all that kind of stuff, right? So that's more my taste. So what's recently happening is the House of the Dragon is getting pitted up against Lord of the Rings of Power, as both are slated to be coming out within weeks of each other, which is very, very interesting. And I also think it's very, very good because they're both fantasy genre specific. So what's very, really cool about this is a huge boost for the genre, especially if they do insanely well. And it's also a really, really, really cool reward for fantasy fans like myself and potentially you. Companies are really starting to dig into fantasy genre more, which we have not seen for a while, and that's very, very exciting. And I think part of the reason why we don't always see this is because you need the budget. A lot of this stuff costs a lot of money to make, create, research, and do. From the scouting locations to the marketing to the special effects to the set designs, everything. It costs so much money. As of right now, Lord of the Rings of Power, brought to you by Amazon Studios, is reportedly the most expensive TV show ever made. So they are sparing no expense to bring this to life. And so the two dates that you want to circle on your calendar or type into your mobile phone are as follows. House of the Dragon is slated to debut on August 21st, and Lord of the Rings of Power for Amazon Studios on Amazon Prime Video is slated for September 2nd. House of the Dragon is supposed to take place 200 years before Game of Thrones, and then Lord of the Rings of Power, which we saw the first official trailer during the Super Bowl this past year, is supposed to be during the second age of Middle Earth. And this is basically roughly around the time of Isildur, during the battle for Middle Earth, when he cuts off the finger of Sauron, which gives him the Ring of Power. This stuff was briefly touched on in the Lord of the Rings films, but like the people that are the creators of The Mandalorian discuss, there's only so much you can fit into a movie that's an hour and a half to 2.5 hours long, and not every movie can support being 2.5 hours long, all right? And not everybody wants to sit there for that, even though they'll binge an entire season of television, which is a different topic entirely. So you have to be very selective about your writing. A lot of stuff you can't, be in depth and involved with. You have to have to be quick and purposeful in what you write, and no wasted second, so forth and so on. So when you turn something into a TV series, you have that opportunity to be more meaningful and insightful and more evolved and in depth with the stories that you're telling. And this is what we're going to find, instead of it briefly being touched on in the Lord of the Rings films, which, I mean, those films in and of themselves were already long, so you can imagine. Now they're going to be able to tell that story so much more in depth and give you kind of the precursor to Aragorn being the heir of men and the throne of Gondor, and uniting men in Middle Earth. Okay, you're getting the precursor to that and what his ancestors did, and the time of the elves and all this other stuff. It's going to be really, really cool. Now, how this relates to George R.R. Martin, while he wants the Lord of the Rings of Power to do well, he wants his show to do even better. And he said something to the effect of, if they win 6 Emmys, I want to win 7. And I don't blame him. I'm a very competitive person too. I always want to do well. I always want to exceed my expectations, but I'm also the type of person that tries to feel as though I'm my only competition. Am I being better than the person I was the day before? Am I doing better than what I could have done a year ago, 5 years ago, so forth and so on? And I think that's a much more healthier way to go about it than as opposed to basically comparing yourself to every other person. You know, that becomes so toxic and unhealthy. So I think this is going to be really, really cool. I think it's great for business. I think it's great for all kinds of fantasy fans. The Independent did a great interview with George R.R. Martin if you want to check out the full interview. And do not forget, House of the Dragon, which takes place 200 years before Game of Thrones, is set to debut on August 21st. And then Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, will debut on September 2nd. When those happen, comment below on which one you are more excited to see. Are you a fan of both? And which one do you anticipate doing better? Let me know in the comments below and which ones you're a fan of. Thank you, everybody. Stay tuned.